Gathered, of course, to remember and to honor Irwin, Yishmael ben Zev Wolf, Velvel in the Yiddish. In Jewish tradition, a funeral, and really any of the mitzvahs we do in the memory of the departed are not just in their memory, but we're doing that together. And what that means is that our loved one who has lived his life and at 93 plus years, the time has come. Our loved one is really a soul. And a human is really a soul more than a body. And a soul, a neshama in Hebrew, only moves on from stage to stage and from place to place. But a soul, being divine, being a spark of God, never really dies. So when we come together, we mourn the loss of the body of the individual who we knew and how we knew him or her. We're really doing that together with the soul who's mourning his own body as well and moving on to a next beautiful stage. So everything we do in Jewish tradition is cognizant of that. And we remain aware, we remain focused, and that Irwin is really present with us in his own way and hearing our prayers and our good wishes and participating in that with prayers of his own. We start with the 23rd Psalm. You have that in the little booklet if you have it on the inside on the top. You have it in English. I'm going to say it in Hebrew, but you're welcome to follow along in the English, read it along, however it works for you. And of course, in this chapter of the Tehillim, we're remembering how God is with us in every situation, as King David says, even in the shadow of death. God is with us in every place and in every stage. And God is with Irwin as he makes his transition to what the Jewish tradition calls the world of truth. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, bin eis desha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchais yenaleni, nafshi yeshove v'yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemoi. Gam ki elech begeit salmoves, lo yira ra ki ata imodi. Shiftecha mishantecha, heima yinachamoni. Tarech lefonai shulchan neged tzoyroi, dishanta v'Hashem en roishi, kaisi revaya, ach toiv v'chesed yerdefuni, kol yemei chayoi, v'shavti b'veis Adonai, la'orech yamim. King Solomon writes that Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, the candle of God is the soul of the human. What we use candles for, God used souls for. We use candles, or modern versions of them, to bring light, to change a dark situation to a place and a reality of light and of goodness. And God uses souls, and that's all of us, to bring light where it may have been dark, and to bring goodness where it may have been different. And every soul is like a little bit of that light and a little bit of that flame. But there's another reason why we call a soul a candle and a flame, and that's because the candle is always rising up. Of course, you can try this at home or don't, but if you light a candle, light a match, the flame will always point upwards, and no matter how far you go the other way, the flame will keep going up. And that means the flame always wants to rise. The flame wants to be a little more godly, a little more spiritual, a little more less grounded in the materialistic, difficult world we sometimes find ourselves in. A neshama, a soul, is that flame. It always, deep down, wants to be home with God. It always wants to be in the presence of the source, of the real flame, of the bonfire, if you will, of the large flame behind all the little candles, which is God himself. And at the time of one's passing, that's when that soul makes that shift and does come home into the presence of God. That's why we read these prayers, and we're going to read the Kel Molei Rachamim, with which we bless and wish and pray that the soul be taken in home into the presence of God. But there's something else to point out, and that's what the Torah calls Chesed Shel Emes, the true kindness. The true kindness is the kindness we do with those who have departed, because they don't come around to give us kickbacks. And nobody ever helped someone who had passed on or did a favor in their honor, hoping to get something in return. That's the true kindness, the kindness we do only for the mitzvah, only for its own sake. And I want to point that out because Irwin has the distinction of being buried according to Jewish tradition, and that means not only doing the service as we're doing right now and right here in the Jewish community, in the Jewish environment, but it actually means the process that comes before that, all the way from what we call the Tahara and all the steps of the way, to be done in beautiful accordance with Jewish tradition. A lot of people forget that's important, and it doesn't come through in their wishes, but then that blessing is missing. Irwin is lucky to have that blessing, and I bring this up so we can all keep in mind, for every human being choosing their own wishes or making choices for a family member, that the only real gift we can give to a departed one who's gone is to follow the tradition. None of us has ever been on the other side, but we know what the Torah teaches is the right way to go about it. And the more we do that, the more blessing we bring our loved one, and in turn, all of ourselves. I'm going to ask Reed to say a few words in honor of his grandfather.
My grandfather was somebody that I got to know quite well towards the end, and he was truly one of my friends. He was one of the nicest people I will have ever known, and I'm going to miss him dearly. Speaking with him, about his life and his accomplishments, of which there are many. He had a hardware store employing 20 people. He was nice to everybody. He was always friends in the neighborhood, and he used to tell me all about how whether it was during the riots or anything, he took care of everybody around him, and they took care of him. And that's why he said, my building was the only one that didn't get burned down. And I got to know him in the end. He was bedbound. And I don't know about you, but if I were bedbound, I would be very, very miserable all the time. But he was always there with a smile and a joke, and he was always happy to see me. And, learning to talk with him, and learning, more about him as a human being, taking care of him was probably one of the most stressful but rewarding experiences of my life, truly. And it's a gift. And it's something I would never have gone back in time and not done. At the end of the day, family, we only have each other, and when you're called to act center stage in the interest of another human being, it's the right thing to do. And I was blessed to have gotten to know him as intimately as I did, and I'm going to miss him.
Thank you, Reed. That was beautiful, and I think your grandfather was blessed to have you at his side all the way to the very end, literally so. And God should bless you for everything you've done, and together with you, the entire family and all those who loved Irwin and will miss him. The Kel Molei Rachamim prayer I mentioned is where we ask God to bring the departed under his wing in the presence of the Shekhinah, the divine presence. But I'll tell you a little inside information. It doesn't happen on its own. Coming into the presence of God is fueled, it's energized, by the mitzvahs we do. All the mitzvahs Irwin did in his lifetime, they drive his soul to the presence of God. They drive his soul. They support that peace. And once somebody is gone, it's true the soul lives on, but souls don't walk around and help people. And souls don't walk around and do mitzvahs or pray or study Torah or lay tefillin or any other of the special things we can do in our lives. And that's why it becomes the responsibility of the rest of us to say, okay, Irwin did what he managed to do when he was here. What am I going to do now for him? What mitzvah am I going to do that maybe I didn't do before, or I didn't do enough of before, in Irwin's memory, or really I would say as a gift, to help his soul find more peace and more blessing in God's presence. I did talk to some family members about that, and we did talk specifically about tefillin, and that's actually providential because this week in the Torah portion we're going to read where the Torah tells us to wear tefillin, just as the Jews are leaving Egypt, which we read about this week for the first time. So it's really the right time for us to think about putting tefillin more often than we may have done till now. And if that's a mitzvah in Irwin's honor, then that's beautiful. But really it can be any mitzvah, wherever any of us thinks we can do better, doing a little better, doing a little more good in the memory of a loved one is really the greatest gift we can give them. So with that in mind, when we read the Kil Moli Rachamim, I'm going to ask that you take those moments, well, you do have it in English on the bottom of here, but I'm going to read it in Hebrew. And it is read in the tune. And I'm going to ask that you take those moments just to reflect on what might you do a little better, or just a little more than before, in memory of Irwin. El Moli Rachamim Sheichim Reimim Amtzeim Enochanecheina Tachas Kanfei Ashchina B'maleis Kedeishim Utayrim Kezayar Arakiya Mazidim Es Nishmas Yishmael Ben Zevov Shalach Li'elamai Bavur Shanadut Staka Bataskaras Nishmasai Began Eden Taim Menuchasai Lachain Balarachim Yesterday you will say second half of the Elamim V'yitzer B'tzrachayim Es Nishmasai Adinayu Nachalasai V'yadnuach B'shalom HaMishkavei V'nei Maramein. With that, we begin the actual burial. And the interment, the reason we lower the casket into the earth is because the earth is the original source of life, where the man was originally created from, as Torah says, and where God says that man should return to that ultimate source of life, not only to be brought back home as it will, but actually in faith and in belief, in trust in God's promise that one day when the Mashiach comes, all life begins anew from the earth, and that's what we call the Tchiyat HaMesim, when actually everybody comes back to life in a better time. Once the technical work is done, we begin the mitzvah of actual burial in the earth. And we do this by shoveling a little bit of the earth in. It's a mitzvah for everybody to participate, even just a little bit, putting that earth inside, although the tradition is that direct descendants of the departed do not participate. The rest of us have that mitzvah of kindness to the departed one by actually taking part in this mitzvah, and that's what the shovels are for. Right, as soon as we're ready and the casket is fully in position and covered. And that was a little bit of the earth of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. That's part of the tradition and the hope and prayer for restoration of Jerusalem. Come up and take part of the mitzvah. The shovel is not passed from one to the other, but just left on the pile. Once we have a full layer covering the casket, we're going to be able to say the Kaddish, and that's why I just want to take a moment to thank everybody who came out to make sure there's a minyan. It's not a short drive from Rogers Park or Lincolnwood, or even just in the neighborhood. So that's a real beautiful mitzvah. Thank you. you're part of the minyan, just come a little closer for the Kaddish. Reed is going to read the regular Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, because on the eve of Rosh Chodesh of the new month, that means it's already a happier time. Prayers are modified for that. That itself is a blessing for the departed. Amen. 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 Rabba Mugara. Mahoma Momel. Maya Yizvardi. Amen.
Say shalom bim Rilmo. Who ya esh shalom Aliana.
Amen. That concludes the Kaddish, which does conclude the service. And again, we thank everybody who came out special for all the Kaddish was said. The first Kaddish read after a burial, the entry point for Neshama into the Olam Haba, into the world to come. That's a special blessing for Irwin, and that's in the schus of everyone who made the time to make that possible. When the service concludes, we line up on the road. We're actually going to take the line all on one side, so Ricky can come by and we'll say Amakom Yinachem, the blessing of the mourner.